Thank you for joining us. My name is Hussam Aldeeb. I'm the International Student Career Advisor here at Mohawk College. And today we have Elizabeth Long and Mary McDonald, immigration lawyers from the law firm Long Mingalji. And today they're going to talk about some really important topics for our international students, everything from, pursuing your PR to postgraduate work permit, questions that could be answered as well. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Elizabeth and we'll go from there. Thank you, Elizabeth. Oh, Elizabeth might be frozen.
Yes, I think so. Let me just see.
Oh, there she is. Okay, you're good now.
Sorry, here I am. I'm sorry. I think my internet is a little bit choppy today. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so thanks so much, Hussam. It's great to be here today. And so with me, I have Mary, who is another lawyer at our firm. And we're very happy. Every year we get invited a few times by Mohawk to speak with you guys. And today we're going to go through our presentation. If you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. And we will try to get to as many of your questions as we can at the end of the presentation. All right? Okay, let's get going. Sorry, just bear with me. Are you guys seeing the right screen or is it the wrong screen? The right screen? Okay, excellent. Okay, so we're going to be talking about how to get permanent residence, but before we get there, we need to talk about temporary residence first. What do you do now while you are a temporary resident, while you have your study permit, and later when you have your work permit? So first of all, very importantly, in order to keep your student status, it's not just enough to have a valid study permit. You have to actively pursue your studies. If you don't, you will lose your status after 90 days when you stop actively pursuing studies. Actively pursuing studies means you're studying, you're going to class, you are enrolled as a full-time student, or even part-time, you're still actively pursuing studies, okay? Now, there are a couple of ways that are exceptions to the rule. One is if you are on a scheduled break. So scheduled breaks are whatever the school has on their academic calendar. So for example, your summer breaks or your spring breaks, etc. Those are fine. The other one is an authorized leave. Authorized leave are personal requests that you have to first make to the school, where the school gives you permission to take a break. And the authorized leave is up to 150 days, so only for one semester, okay? Now, during your authorized leave, you're not allowed to work because you're not fully enrolled as a student. We're going to talk about that. But you can go on the authorized leave for a semester, and that is still counted as actively pursuing studies, so you don't lose your status even though you're not in school for that semester. But remember, you have to get permission from the school in order to get the authorized leave. So talking about working while you are studying, you're only allowed to work if you are a full-time student. If you are a part-time student, you can only work if it's the last semester of your program. Any other semesters, if you're a part-time student, that study permit alone will not allow you to work. Once you've completed your studies, are you a full-time enrolled student? No, you are not. The minute you get that, you receive notification, maybe it's a letter, maybe it's your transcripts, that you have completed your program, IRCC says that means you're no longer a student, so you have to stop working right at that time, okay? The only exception is if you have already been accepted to another program. So you finished your program and you've been accepted to another program, and in between it's only one semester, no more than 150 days. Then in between those two programs, you can work at that time.
Okay. So another really important thing to always make sure is that you maintain your status while you're here in Canada. So the first thing you need to do is pull out your study permit and take a look at the expiry date and write it down on your calendar. Make sure that you know when your study permit is going to expire and pay close attention to this date. Because if your program is going to end after the expiry date of your study permit, then you're going to need to apply for an extension. So if you apply for an extension on your study permit before the expiry date of your current study permit, so you apply for an extension before that date, then you have what's called maintained or implied status. And that will allow you to continue studying until a decision is made on your extension. And the key is knowing that you have to submit the extension properly. So if you miss a form or you don't include the proper information, you can receive a refusal, which means that you will no longer have that implied or maintained status. So you need to apply for an extension before the end of your study permit and make sure that it's properly filled out and properly filed before that date. Once you've made that extension application, if you need to, you have what's called, as I said, implied or maintained status. Implied status requires that you do stay in Canada until a decision is made on the new application. Otherwise, if you do leave Canada before a decision is made, then your implied status will end. And if you were to re-enter, if you were authorized, for example, with a visa and you re-entered, you wouldn't be able to study until a decision was made. So it's best to stay in Canada while you're waiting for a decision on your extension, while you have implied status. And then another thing to understand is, so let's say you wake up one day and you realize, oops, I totally missed that day on my calendar that I marked down and my study permit has now expired. So from the day that your study permit expired, you have 90 days to apply for what's called restoration. So you can apply to restore your status back to being a student, but you have to make sure that you actually file that application within 90 days of the expiry. So if you lose your status, that allows you, as I said, to get the status back. And it's just really important to keep that 90-day deadline in mind, because it's either the day that your study permit expired, that's when the 90 days start, or if you did what I mentioned earlier and you have applied for an extension before the expiry of your study permit, but then let's say you filed something incorrectly or you get a refusal, it's 90 days from the date that you get that refusal letter. So if you get a refusal on that application, you can apply for restoration, but again, it has to be in that 90 days. So whenever, yeah, sorry, go ahead. That's everything for me on that one.
That's everything. Okay, great. Thanks, Mary. Okay, so let's talk about your post-grad work permit. Now, the post-grad work permit is really the grand prize at the end of your studies. It really is something that is to be cherished. Normally, to get a work permit, you have to jump through a lot of hoops, and not just you. You would have to have an employer who has to file a labor market impact assessment, an LMIA, where they have to show that they can find a Canadian to do the job. And it's very difficult to A, find an employer who's willing to do that, and B, have a job offer where you can get an LMIA, right? So the post-grad work permit is an open work permit. Once you graduate, you can apply for it. You can get it, and you can work anywhere you like. But the question that you should first ask yourself is not, how do I get it? Is, should I now apply for a post-grad work permit? Because right now, the post-grad work permit is only once in a lifetime deal, okay? Now, there has been some temporary policies this year and some of the years before where they have allowed students to extend their work permit, but these are temporary policies and you cannot depend on that being in place when you graduate. The government is saying that they want to revamp the student program. We don't know what that will look like. for those of you who have registered for this webinar, we're going to be adding you automatically onto our newsletter, where we will be sending you news on important things like that. So we'll send that to you. It's just news on important immigration news. If you don't like it, you can certainly unsubscribe. Okay. But right now, because the postgrad work permit is only once in a lifetime, don't waste it. So what I mean by don't waste it is the length of the postgrad work permit, first of all, is very important. If you only have a 1-year program, you will only get a 1-year work permit at the end. Now, with that 1-year work permit, it may or may not be enough for you to get the work experience that you need in order to stay and get your permanent residence. A lot of programs, for example, will need you to have a 1-year work experience in Canada. So if it takes you a few months to find a job and then to work, maybe you might not get that 1-year work experience in under your belt before your work permit expires, right? So if you do a 2-year program or more, you get a 3-year work permit. If you've only done a 1-year program, you can do another 1-year program, and the 1 + 1 will equals to 3-year postgrad work permit as well. Okay, it's not everybody who needs to do that, but it really depends on your own circumstance. So you really need to plan before you just go and file a postgrad work permit. You need to plan on what you need to do. Very importantly, distance education. During COVID, there were some relaxations on this rule, but now it's back to the normal rules for distance education. So if you do distance education for more than 50% of your program, then you won't qualify for the postgrad work permit. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Also, full-time student status, other than the last semester, if you go part-time during any of your studies, that could mean that you will not qualify for the postgrad work permit in the end. Okay. Sometimes I have students who say, hey, you know what? I'm not doing so well in some of the courses. I probably might even fail some of the courses. So I'm just going to drop these courses so they don't show up in my transcript, right? And that might be good for maybe, you know, looking good for jobs, etc. But it doesn't, it will allow, if you drop courses so that you become a part-time student in one of these semesters, you may have to do another program in order to qualify for postgrad work permit. So make sure you keep that in mind. You're not the same as your Canadian classmates. Full-time student status is very, very, very important in order for you to get your postgrad work permit at the end. There are a couple of exceptions. One is the authorized leave that we've talked about. If you take the entire semester off, you're okay, with the school's permission, of course. And also the final semester, you can go part-time, and that's not a big deal. Okay. Now, finally, we're going to talk about this timeline, because a lot of people get confused, because it is confusing, because on the IRCC website, it says one thing, but I'm telling you another thing. Okay. So when should you apply for your postgrad work permit? Let's talk about deadlines. The deadline I want you to keep in mind is when your study permit expires and 90 days after you first get the indication that you've completed your program. So whichever comes first, okay? If your study permit expires before the 90 days, your deadline is your study permit. If your study permit expires after the 90 days, your deadline is the 90 days. Now you say, Elizabeth, why do you say 90 days when the IRCC website says 180 days? It's 90 days because if you apply within that deadline, you can work while waiting for your work permit to be issued. If you apply after that timeline, you can't work and you have to file a restoration of status. That is because when you apply for the postgrad work permit, you're supposed to have valid student status when you apply, okay? Especially if you're inside Canada, okay? So keep that timeline in mind. Let me just sort of go through a little illustration of the timeline. Okay, so let's say you're writing final exams. Okay, at that point, you're still a full-time student, so you can work. All right. Waiting for results, still a full-time student, so you can still work. All right, now the school sends you something. I don't know if it's your portal or sends you a letter or something, or email, okay, saying congratulations, you've completed your program. At that point, are you a full-time student? No, you are not under immigration rules. At that point, since you are no longer a full-time student, you have to stop working. You can't continue to work based on your study permit. If you submit your post-grad work permit within, what's the deadline? 90 days of you completing your program, and, big and, while your study permit is still valid, at that point, you can start working. And you can start working full-time at that point, okay? You don't have to have a work permit in hand. You can have submitted your application, and at that point, you can start working full-time. All right, let's talk about permanent residence.
Okay, so after you've graduated and you've applied for your postgrad work permit and you've followed all of the instructions on our previous slides, you'll be holding a postgrad work permit, which allows you to work for any employer in Canada. And so you'll be entering the job market, looking for job offers, going to interviews, everything like that. When you're starting out working after you study, it's really important to understand this distinction that IRCC makes between high and low skilled work. So IRCC has divided every job into different 5-digit, what are called national occupation codes, or NOC codes. They're divided into 6 tiers, which correspond to the level of work. So tiers 0 to 3, so 0, 1, 2, or 3 are considered high-skilled jobs, whereas tiers 4 and 5 are considered low-skilled jobs. Many of the programs for PR for Canada, so if you want to become a permanent resident, many programs require you to have a year of high-skilled work experience. So when you're about to accept a position after you graduate, you need to understand if the job you're going to be doing is considered high or low-skilled. And the problem that we see people running into with this is sometimes IRCC will change the designations for each job. So for example, last year they changed several positions that used to be considered low skilled are now considered high skilled. We've listed a few examples here on the slide: truck drivers, nurse aides, dental assistants, heavy equipment operators, tattoo artists. And then some of the jobs that used to be considered high skilled are now considered low skilled, such as tailors, other performers, program leaders, sports and fitness instructors, court clerks. So these programs can change, and you need to make sure that you have the updated version of the NOC code so that you know, again, whether you're doing high or low skilled work. We're going to send out these slides after the presentation, so you can take a look at the link that's on that slide. But the problem that we see a lot of students run into is sometimes they'll just rely on something that their friend has done, or they'll go based off of information they see on social media or in forums, and that it's great to try and figure it out, but it's so important to get good advice, ideally from a lawyer, about what your position would be falling under in terms of high or low skilled, because you don't want to spend that time working and then find out later that it's low skilled and it doesn't qualify you for the programs that you're hoping to go through.
All right. So now let's start talking about the programs. The first program that I'm going to talk to you guys about is Express Entry. Express Entry, many of you have probably heard about it before, but there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings about the program. So let's go into it in detail. So first of all, in order to get into Express Entry, you have to start an online profile. And you can put in an online profile if you qualify under one of 3 categories: federal skilled worker class, Canadian Experience class, and the Federal Skilled Trades class. Now, once you have an online profile, you'll be able to enter the express entry pool. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people say, oh, I've applied for express entry. I've applied for permanent residence just because they've entered the express entry pool. That is incorrect. Just because you've entered the express entry pool does not mean that you have applied for permanent residence. It just means that you have told the government, hey, I'm interested and I qualify under one of the 3 categories, okay? Once you enter the express entry pool, you get a series of points that's related to your background if you have permanent provincial nomination. And every few weeks or so, the government has a draw where they invite people based on their points, based on sometimes the category that they were qualified under, and also what's called the new category-based draws, which we will talk about, okay? And it's only if you get an invitation to apply, the ITA, that you are able to actually submit your application finally to apply for permanent residence. If you don't get the ITA, you stay in the pool. After 1 year, your profile expires and you're kicked out. You can apply again, you can put your profile in again and see if they might invite you to apply again. Okay, so it's not just about getting into the pool, it's really about getting that invitation to apply so you can get out of the pool as well. Well, let's first talk about how to get into the pool. The first category, called the Federal Skilled Worker class, many of you may already qualify for. The work experience required for this is 1 year of high-skilled work experience in one occupation that's full-time, okay, and continuous. So Mary has talked about what high-skilled means. It doesn't have to be work inside Canada. It can be work anywhere in the world. It can be work you gained while you're studying, and it can be self-employed work experience, okay? After that, there's other factors that come into play, and we calculate your points. You also need to have financial savings. And if you meet that criteria, you can be in the pool. Remember, it's just to get in the pool, it's not to get out. The second way to get into the pool is called the Canadian Experience class. This is the work experience that's very different from the Federal Skilled Worker class. This work experience is also the same kind of work experience that you need to have in order to get the points later on for express entry for Canadian work experience. And the work experience here is 1 year of high-skilled work experience in Canada. That is when you are employed. Self-employed work does not count. And it has to be high-skilled. It has to be full-time, at least 30 hours a week. And it cannot be work experience you gained while you are a full-time student, okay? And it has to be legal work experience as well. The skilled trades class, I don't get into it too much because you have to have an LMIA and or a certification in the trades, and it's only for those who are in the trades, okay? All right, so let's say you can get into the pool. That doesn't mean, remember, that you can actually get out of the pool. So let's talk about what points, what factors will give you those points. First of all, age. Age is one of those things you can't really change, but it makes a big, big difference in your score. Basically, by the time you're in your 30s, the points go down. Every year it's your birthday, -5 points, -6 points. By the time you get to your 40th birthday, -10 points, -11 points. By the time you're 45, The good news is it doesn't go down anymore. The bad news is your age points is 0. Now compare that to someone in their 20s who has 110 points. That could make a huge difference. There's not a lot you can do about age except to apply when you are younger to sort of maximize your time. Education is if you have 2 programs, post-secondary programs, with one at least being 3 years. So if you, for example, if you have a bachelor's degree from, from in India, and then you have another, the Mohawk program in Canada, that really will make you jump. Language is very important. The points right now are really so high that we are looking at people who have language points of at least a CLB 9 in each skill category. So for example, if you have a IELTS is 7 in reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening, or CELPIP is 9. Unless you probably can go into one of those category-based draws, etc., which we will talk about. Relevant Canadian work experience. This is the work experience that I talked about. It's the same kind of work experience as that of the Canadian experience class. 1 year of high-skilled work experience where you are employed. You get a T4 at the end. You don't hire yourself, okay? You're not a contractor, okay? It's not that you don't have a contract. It's just that you are an employee, okay? And it's can't be work experience you gained while you are a full-time student. But you know that time when you're waiting for your work permit, if you applied within that deadline I told you, within 90 days and while your study permit is still valid, and you're working while waiting for your work permit, that time does count, okay? Foreign work experience. If you have high-skilled work experience outside of Canada, that might get you some points. Your spouse's education, language, Canadian work experience could add or take away some points. By the way, who's your spouse? A spouse is obviously someone who's married to you, but it also includes common law. So common law is when you are with someone, you're living with someone who's your conjugal partner for at least 1 year, okay? Now it's very important to declare your common law relationship, because the government will always ask you on every single application what your marital status is. And if you are common law, it would be misrepresentation for you to say, I'm single. If you are common law, you've lived with your partner for at least 1 year, you have to say that you're common law. And common law spouses, it's the same as being married. It really, you can team up together, you can help each other out as well, okay? Provincial nominee programs, we're going to talk about that. Or I think Mary will talk about that, and how that can add if you get nominated by a province, such as Ontario, but it has to be express entry linked. It can't be just any provincial nominee program, okay? You will get 600 points. Previously study in Canada, so if you studied a 1 year or 2 year program at Mohawk, you get 15 points. 3 year program would be 30 points. Arranged employment. This is something where you can't get arranged employment with just a post-grad work permit. But if you are able to get, for example, a LMIA, and especially for some positions with tech positions, for example, where the employers don't actually have to do recruitment, that is possible. Or if you have one of the countries, a lot of South American countries, like Mexico, Mexico is North America, but Latin America. So Mexico, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Panama, and other countries as well around the world, Japan, Australia, Europe, UK. So many of these countries have free trade agreements where your employer, if they offer you a job, they don't have to have any sort of LMIA, and you can get an employer-specific work permit. With that, you can get 50 points for arranged employment, okay? And if you have brothers or sisters or Canadian permanent residents in Canada, that's something. And if you're fluent in French, also, you can get a lot of points with that. Trade certification, those are people in the trades who get, for example, the Red Seal trade certification or the other kinds of professional trade certifications from the province. So, looking at all that, some people may have a good chance. Other people right now, the general scores are so high, they're above 500. And you may or may not be invited to apply. And we need to, when you come to us, we do look at options for you to raise your points. Maybe we can go and do an LMIA or a work permit for you. Maybe, you just need to study a little bit harder on those IELTS and get that, 0.5 or 1 point more in order for us to make your points jump. And a lot of times it's the Canadian work experience that will make a huge difference as well, okay? So one more thing, and this is one of the reasons why the general draws, where they just invite anyone who's in the pool, is so high. It's because the government just started a new kind of draw called the category-based draws this summer. And what category-based draws are, you're just like the government now starts to go through whoever's in the pool, and they start to invite people who either are very high in French language proficiency, or they have 6 months of work experience in one of these occupations in the last 3 years. Okay, and we put a link in here as well that you can go on, and if you have that work experience, they have special draws where they, for example, they're just inviting people who are in the healthcare occupations. Well, if they're only inviting people who are in the healthcare occupations, there's not that many. And so the points for that could be a lot lower than if they're doing general draws. Okay? All right.
Okay, so Elizabeth has mentioned ways to qualify to get CRS points through express entry. And as she mentioned, there are ways that you can get extra points through what are called the provincial nomination or nominee programs, or PNPs. Every province has their own provincial nomination program, and Ontario's is called the OINP. So with the OINP, it has some streams that are linked to express entry, which I'm going to explain, and then it also has some that are just through OINP. It's not through express entry. Starting with the express entry ones. So the way that these streams work is, in order to be considered for this program, you have to have a profile in express entry already. So you have to be in the pool, you have to qualify. Either that's with a year of foreign work experience that's high skilled, maybe you have Canadian work experience, all of those things Elizabeth went through. You need to be able to meet the basic requirements of express entry to be considered. In these streams, so once you're in the pool, you're waiting for Ontario to do a draw, and then they give you what's called a notification of interest. So they will do these draws, but they don't announce when they're going to do them beforehand. So it is best to get in the pool for express entry as soon as possible if you think that you will qualify. So if Ontario is interested in you, as I said, they send you a notification of interest, and they have some categories of people that they've identified for people that they're interested in giving these notifications of interest to. So the first two that I'm going to talk about, the human capital and the French speaking stream, they both do require a bachelor's degree, but the bachelor's degree doesn't have to have been from Canada. It can be elsewhere. So for example, if you hold a bachelor's degree, you can potentially qualify for both of these. The human capital stream, so as I said, it requires a bachelor's degree or higher, and they basically they use this stream to target people that they're particularly interested in. So they specify certain things like people who work in tech, people with certain job offers, people with certain work experience. And so if you're in the pool and you meet those basic qualifications and say you have work experience that the OIMP is interested in, you might receive an invitation from them. The other one, another one is the French speaking stream. So in order to qualify for an invitation through this stream, you need to have a CLB level of 7 in French and a 6 in English. And also you do require a bachelor's for that stream. And then the third one through the human capital, through the the express entry linked streams is the skilled trade stream. So if you work in one of the identified occupations under this stream, and you've been working in that occupation for at least a year in Ontario within the last 2 years, you might get an invitation from Ontario based off of your express entry profile. The nice thing about this stream is it doesn't require a bachelor's degree. So as long as you have a work permit and you've been working for 1 year in a skilled trade that they're interested in, you could receive a a notification of interest through this stream. And if you get that notification of interest, it gives you the opportunity to add 600 points to your express entry score, which gives you a very strong chance of getting an invitation whenever express entry does their next draw. Okay. And so aside from those express entry streams that the way that you qualify for them is having an express entry profile, there's also programs that are just through the OINP's own portal. So these are called the expression of interest or the EOI streams. So these streams have different requirements than the express entry link streams, and they also have a different application process. So you don't have to have an express entry profile for this, but you do need to register your expression of interest in the Ontario portal to be qualifying for these draws. And so once you've registered into the OINP pool, you'll be waiting for Ontario to do a draw for that particular stream and then give you a notification of interest. Again, Ontario, they don't announce when they're going to be doing these draws, and you do need to be in the pool to be able to take advantage if you do qualify for one of these streams. It's so frustrating when, for example, you realize that you did qualify for one of these streams and they did a draw last week at the exact point score that you have, but you weren't in the pool, so you didn't get the opportunity to apply for the stream. So it's just really important to understand when you might qualify and getting in as soon as you can. So once you get selected, you get a letter, you apply for your nomination, and once that goes through, you apply for PR through the federal government. So where express entry is a 2-step process, this is more of a 3-step process. And the streams themselves are also different. I'm going to get into a few of them here. But essentially, pardon me, just bear with me for 1 second. Yeah, so there's just briefly going over, there are streams for the master's and PhD level programs. So for example, if you have a spouse who's looking at doing a master's or a PhD, they could potentially look at these streams. You do have to apply within 2 years of graduating. You don't need a job offer, and you have to be ready to enter the labor market. The next streams through these are the employer-based streams. So for the employer-based streams, you need to both meet the OIMP qualifications and you need a job offer from an employer who meets certain qualifications. So for all of these streams, the business that's supporting your application needs to have been in business for 3 years. Mohawk College, you're located in Hamilton, so my understanding is that's outside of the GTA for the purposes of OINP. That's correct, Elizabeth, right? Yeah, okay. So if you, for example, get a job offer from from an employer in Hamilton, they have to have been in business for 3 years. They have to show that they have at least 500,000 in gross income in the last fiscal year and at least 3 full-time Canadian or PR employees. If you end up getting a job offer within the GTA, they have to have at least 1 million in gross income in the last fiscal year and at least 5 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. The job offer itself has to be full-time and permanent means no end date on your contract. So within these employer-based streams, there are 3 different categories. There's the international student stream, and this could apply for people attending this webinar. So when you have completed your program of study in Ontario, you need to put yourself into this pool within 2 years of graduation to be able to get PR through this stream. So you have to have graduated from an eligible program, first of all. So an eligible program for this stream means either you've done a 2-year program or you've done a 1-year postgraduate program from an eligible school, such as Mohawk College. And this is really important for those of you who might be completing a 1-year program to understand. There's a very, very specific rule that you need to make sure you meet to qualify for this. For 1-year programs, one of the admission requirements for your program has to have been that a degree was required. So you go and you look at the admission requirements, and if one of them was that you needed a degree to enter the program, then it can qualify for the international student stream. Otherwise, it won't meet the requirements and you won't be able to use it for the international student stream through OINP. So aside from the education.
Also, oh, sorry, just to sort of add to that, if your program said either a degree or a diploma, or a degree, a diploma, or work experience is okay, that's not good enough. It has to be only that a degree must have been a prerequisite. The government is talking about changing this. They have not changed it yet.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Elizabeth. So you need to have the education requirements met, and then you need a job offer from your employer who meets the requirements I explained. And you also need to make the low wage rate for your occupation according to the location of your employment. The next stream is the skilled worker stream. So again, you need to have that job offer from the qualifying employer. And in this stream, you do need work experience. So you need at least 2 years of work experience within the last 5 years that's in the same occupation as your job offer. That work experience doesn't have to have been in Ontario or Canada. It can have been abroad, but you have to be able to show that you do just have the 2 years of work experience for your job. It has to be a high-skilled position that you're getting offered, and the salary that you're making has to be what's considered the median wage for the location of your employment. For this particular program, there are no specific education requirements. So, for example, if your spouse has a job offer and has work experience, this could be a good place to start for PR, depending on their other qualifications. And then the third stream is the in-demand job offer stream. So the OINP has a list of occupations that qualify for this program. It's not just every occupation. There's a very, very specific list. And it's one of the only programs that does include low-skilled job offers and positions. So what you need to qualify for this stream is 9 months of experience in Ontario in that same occupation, but it can be with different employers. And you do need to make the median level wage for that occupation in terms of salary. I think that's it for OINP.
One of the things that you need to keep in mind is, especially if you have a spouse who is also here in Canada with you, your spouse might qualify for permanent residence before you can. And so it's important to, keep that in mind, whether you're married or common law. And we usually have the couple come for our consultation. We have you guys evaluated as a family unit together. Okay, it doesn't matter who qualifies for it. One person qualifies, the whole family gets permanent residence. And so the next program, the caregiver program, is another program that oftentimes, it's students who might be interested in this, but also spouses as well, who might also qualify for this as well. So how the caregiver program works is a person needs to have 12 months of full-time work experience in Canada where you're taking care of someone's children, elderly person, or disabled person in their home. And you are employed by that person or their family, okay? It's not through an agency that you're employed. And this work experience, as long as you are legally able to work, so you can do it on a postgrad, your spouse can do it on an open spousal work permit, okay? You can gain that work experience. It's very important that you guys also understand that there is a quota, and the quota each year for those who take care of children is filled up in a matter of minutes. But on the other hand, the people who take care of the elderly people or the disabled, that's another category that does take a while to be filled. So it's much easier to qualify under this program, to be able to get into this program, to apply for this program, if you're taking care of the elderly or disabled person in their home rather than a child. The other criteria is you have a 1-year post-secondary education credential. It could be in Canada, it could be outside of Canada. And the English language benchmark of 5 as well. So IELTS is 5.0 and everything except reading, which I think is a 4. Okay. That's it for the caregiver program. So that might be a program either you might consider when you graduate, or maybe your spouse might also consider as well. All right, we've talked about a lot of different programs, and it might be a little bit daunting and confusing in your mind. So we wanted to give you some practical tips to keep in mind as to what to do next.
Okay, so the first piece of advice is to have a plan in place. You need to have a plan as to what you need to do to get to your immigration goals, not only a short-term plan, but also a long-term plan, to make sure that if you're planning on getting PR, that you're doing what you need to be doing and getting on the right track now.
And, we will give you some information today, but today is not about advice for you as to what to do. When you come for a consultation, and we'll give you some information about how to do that later on, that's when we'll get into your individual plan. What you actually need to do for your own circumstances. And it's very important that you don't just go by what your friends tell you or what you see on the internet. Everybody's situation is different, and the immigration laws in Canada especially change so much. There's always changes to the program, new things that happen every single week. Something new happens in immigration. So it's very important that you have a plan going on that's catered specifically to your circumstances, but it's also that you can continue to, like we work with our clients, when things change and affects their situation, you can pivot as well. And so once you have your plan, you also then need to carry it out. That's, pretty obvious to say, but it's not obvious to do, because there are some things that could be difficult. For example, maybe you need to do another program. Maybe you need to study and, take some practice exams for your IELTS or CELPIP. And, maybe you need to look at how you can extend your work permit, if you can extend your work permit. All of those things, don't think that that's very easy. They may not be very easy to do, but, you've come this far, so far. So I really hope that you can continue on and just carry out the last pieces that you need to do.
The next tip is to just make sure that you stay in status and you don't misrepresent. Keep a close eye on those expiry dates, and tell the truth to immigration. Be very careful when you're filling in your forms, because lying or providing incorrect information on an application can result in up to a 5-year ban from Canada.
Yeah, and it's even if it was an innocent mistake. So for example, sometimes we have people who didn't declare their spouse on their forms. They just didn't think it was that important, or they might land and they were a common law. From there, though, then they are banned from actually sponsoring their spouse. So it can be quite important. Even if you didn't know what happened before, you have to try to rectify it afterwards. Okay? Now, hopefully this doesn't happen to you. But if you do go and apply for something and it is rejected, do not wait. Contact a lawyer right away, not a consultant. Contact a lawyer, okay? the federal court notice period in Canada, if you wanted to go to federal court because the decision was wrong or you felt it was not, that it was unjust, it's only 15 days. If you wait more than 15 days to file the notice, then you're out of luck. If the decision was made outside of Canada, then it's 60 days. Also, you know, you can call the IRCC call center, and oftentimes they will give you information and advice that if you follow and you follow to your detriment, they have there are no consequences. So for example, you call them and you say, this decision isn't fair. What should I do? And they say, well, I'll just put a note on the file for you, or you go and write an email, write a note and put it on the web form, and then, you know, they'll help you out. And you go ahead and do that. You don't really know what you're supposed to say. And then they say no, or they don't answer you. And then you come to me and then you say, hey, Elizabeth, this is what happened. I tried to fix it myself, didn't work. Now, can you help me? That may be a little bit too late for me to do it, because you can only have one reconsideration for a decision. And if you've already submitted something, that's your one kick at the can. Finally, timelines are very, very strict with regard to restoration of status and when you need to file a postgrad work permit. And if you miss those timelines, then really you are going to be from a difficult situation to almost an impossible situation to rectify your status sometimes. So don't wait. If anything happens, hopefully this doesn't happen. You're working with a lawyer from the beginning. But if it does happen, don't wait. Contact a lawyer right away. All right, so here is the information. If you wanted to book a consultation with us, let us know you're from Mohawk, you've been to this webinar, and we will be sure to give you the student discount for the consultation. The student discount rate is $100 for the consultation. You don't have to make it to Toronto. We do everything by Zoom, and we can certainly work with you while you're at Hamilton as well. Okay, let's, we have some questions. So shall we get going on these?
Yeah. Okay. So first question, can I continue working and studying during the period while I'm waiting for a response on the request of an extension of the study permit?
Yes. So if you have filed your study permit before it expired and you're waiting for the study permit and you're still a full-time student, the key is you're still a full-time student, then yes, you can continue to study and work based on the fact that you're on implied status.
Great. Can we go back to our study permit after our postgraduate work permit? I'm sorry if you've already answered that.
I didn't answer that, and it's a good question. So your study permit, it depends on what the situation is. If your study permit is still valid, and you haven't lost it hasn't been over 90 days, you can, or you've been accepted to another program, you could go back to your study permit. But the question that I would have for you is, why are you wasting your postgrad work permit? Why aren't you out, you know, doing work? Because if you waste your postgrad work permit, you only have one chance to get the postgrad work permit, you go to study, then you could lose your opportunity to get permanent residence because you won't have a chance to get the work experience that you need in order to qualify for postgrad work for your permanent residence. That's very specific situations. It may or may not apply to you, but do come to us and we'll do a consultation to really look at what you should be doing.
This one's pretty specific. I'm filing for an extension. My permit will expire March before my study ends in April. On the IMM 5709, I need to fill, there's a section for details of intended study. The duration is mandatory.
This is going to be a very specific thing. Normally we let people know how to fill out your forms once you retain us to be a lawyer on your file so that we can understand your circumstances.
Okay. I'm currently studying a 1-year program. If I apply for a postgrad work permit and complete the year, would I be able to apply for a regular work permit if I receive a contract from my employer?
So I think what this person is talking about is a LMIA based work permit. And it's not just a contract from your employer that you can apply for an LMIA based work permit. Certainly you need a job offer from the employer. The employer has to normally advertise for at least a month, where they have to show they can't find a Canadian to do the job, apply to the government, and have the officer believe that they are not able to find a Canadian to do the job, and then get the LMIA. It can be quite difficult to get in a lot of circumstances. Oh, by the way, you also have to be paid the median wage as well for the occupation as well. So, we're happy to take a look at your circumstances to see whether or not you might be able to get an LMIA based work permit, or perhaps you might be able to get a work permit that's not LMIA based, that's still employer specific as well.
Great. Okay. What is the Ontario Tech Path all about?
I think that what this person means is the Ontario Tech Draw, the OIMP Tech Draw. So that's part of the human capital stream that Mary was talking about. You have to be in the express entry pool first, and then if you have work experience in tech, then the officers will comb through the express entry pool, and your points also have to be at a certain level. They might invite you to apply for 600 points that's added to your express entry. But you first have to be in the express entry pool first to even have a chance for them to invite you to apply.
What if during your application you didn't know what common law was and you chose single?
Okay. So that's going to be an important thing to actually try to address in your future applications. Depending on what the circumstances are, you may need to discuss this in a future application. I can't really say whether you should or not until I know what the circumstances are and what your application is for. So do come for a consultation. We can discuss that.
If, for example, I get hired as an electrical apprentice, is apprentice employment valid to apply for PR, either express entry or provincial nominee?
So apprenticeship, if you are being paid for your work, then that is counted as work experience. Now, whether or not you could qualify for express entry or provincial nomination, it's a question. I don't know your particular circumstances, but certainly a lot of work experience in the trades is very good because there are certain draws. For example, there's the skilled trades draw in Ontario that's there. A lot of the international students or employer-based draws for the federal work for the skilled worker case is also draws based on the trades, and express entry, there's category-based draw for trades as well. So trades is really, really good. If you're in the trades, even if your overall express entry points are lower, don't despair. There may be a lot of programs for you. If you're in the trades, do come to us and we can try to figure out a plan for you.
Okay, here's another pretty specific one.
It looks like this person is telling us their life story here. I feel like this person who is asking about study permit expiring and work experience, and please do come to us for a consultation, and we'll go through not only your questions. Most of the time when we do our consultations, we give you a plan, and people who come to us with a list of questions, they go through the questions and they say, thank you very much, you've answered our questions already. Because most of the time, I think we can anticipate what you need to know during the consultations, but we really do need to talk to you first, understand your circumstances before we can come up with a plan together.
Okay, if you're doing a 1+ 1+1 program and your first program ends in April and the second one resumes in September, can you take on an internship during the break, or what kind of full-time jobs can you do during the wait?
Yeah, so in this situation, that is one that circumstance where you finish one program, you've been accepted already to the September program. In that circumstance, if you've already been accepted to the September program, there's only one semester in between, it's less than 150 days, then yes, certainly you can work during the break. It doesn't have to be internship. It could be internship. It could be any other job. You can work full-time during that one semester in between the two programs.
Okay, what I bet my question is, if I go ahead and get a postgrad work permit and I don't get PR within 1 year of the permit, can I go back to my study permit, do another diploma, and get a postgrad work permit for more years?
So basically, the person's like, okay, I got my 1 year postgrad work permit. I don't qualify for PR. Can I go back and then do another program and get another postgrad work permit? No, you can't. That's what I've been trying to tell you guys. You don't get 2 postgrad work permits in your lifetime. So before you actually go and apply for that first postgrad work permit, hopefully you will go for a consultation. You know whether or not you have a good chance to get your permanent residence. If you don't, you need to understand what you're getting yourself into. Or if you can do another program, a 1+1, you get 3-year work permit, that might be a lot safer. So don't just think, oh, I qualify for a postgrad work permit, let me just apply. That shouldn't be your question. Your first question should be, should I be applying for a postgrad work permit at this time?
Great. Okay, I joined late. Can I get a recording at the end of the webinar?
Yes, we'll send you the recording. I tend to take a little bit of time to sort of edit it a little bit and edit all the pauses and stuff out. And hopefully, I think in the next week or so, we'll send that out to you guys along with the slides.
Does the OINP non-express entry mean you have to apply for PR after you get the nomination?
You have 6 months after you get the nomination, when it's non-express entry, to apply for permanent residence. The whole point to get the nomination really is to get permanent residence. I mean, you also get a work permit as well, but it's really meant for permanent residence. So my question would be, why would you go and apply for the nomination if you don't want to get permanent residence? Do come to us and we can discuss what your goals should be and how to get there.
And then finally, to request a study permit and work permit for my husband extension, should he have work in Canada? Open spousal work permit.
No, your spouse, to get the open spousal work permit, does not need to have a job offer in Canada. However, if you've graduated and you have your postgrad work permit, you're applying for your postgrad work permit, you yourself, to qualify for your postgrad work permit, you don't need a job offer. But if your spouse wants to get a work permit, you have to have a job offer. It used to be high skill, now it could be in any skill level, but you still have to have a job offer and a job in order for your spouse to get their work permit extended. Awesome. All right, so it looks like we made it through all the questions today.
That's great. Thank you so much, as always, Elizabeth and Mary. I think the students got a lot from today, and hopefully the recording will be shared with them, and I can share the recording with additional students if they ask as well. Appreciate all your work, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you next semester.
Thank you so much, Hussam. It's great to be
Thank
here.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.